We are talking about the quadratic formula, and we want to solve quadratic equations using the quadratic formula. So we have x squared minus 8x is equal to 33. And when we're solving this, when we're using the quadratic formula, we need to have whatever the quadratic equation has to be equal to 0. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract 33 from both sides of the equation. So I'm going to write this over here. We have x squared minus 8x equals 33. So I'm going to subtract 33 from both sides of the equation because I want it to be equal to 0. So we get x squared minus 8x minus 33 is equal to 0. So in that case, we're pretty much ready to go with our quadratic formula. We know that the a value is equal to 1. We know that the b value is equal to -8. And we know that the c value is equal to -33. So we're going to write down the quadratic formula, which is x equals -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times ac all over 2a. Now I didn't write in any of these variables because those are the ones that are going to change. Everything else in this formula stays the same. So x equals negative. The negative is important, so I always like to put my b in parentheses to make sure that I account for all the negative signs. Plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4, and there's two places where the a shows up, and there's once in the numerator, once in the denominator, but the c only shows up once. So 2 b's, 2 a's, 1 c. Now we can substitute our values in. So I'm going to write this down again. We have x equals negative plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 all over 2. So those things never change, and we're going to substitute those values in. So we get -8, and this is why I use the parenthesis to make sure that we account for both negatives. And then we're going to substitute a -8 there, 4, and then we have two places where the a shows up. In this case, it doesn't affect the equation, and the c is -33. So we can do some math in here. So we get x equals negative times negative is positive, plus or minus, and that's the square root of 64, and negative times a negative is a positive 132, and then all divided by 2. So we get x equals 8 plus or minus 64 plus 32 is 196. You still have the square root, and that's all divided by 2. And then we get 8 plus or minus the square root of 196 is 14, all divided by 2. So then we can divide 8 and 14 both by 2. So then we get 4 plus or minus 7. And so then our possible solutions for this one are x equals -3 and x equals 11. So we can say 4 minus 7 is equal to -3, and 4 plus 7 is equal to 11. And when we're all said and done, that tells us that we have x is equal to -3 and x is equal to 11. We look at this other example here. We have x squared minus 34x plus 289. And in this case, it's already set in standard form, so we don't have to solve to get 0 like we did on this one. So we can just write down what our variables are. And so we know that a is equal to 1, b is equal to -34, and c is equal to 289. And then we can substitute those into the equation. We have the equation written right here. So we'll write that down. X equals negative plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4 times ac. And that's all over 2a. So in this case, negative b is negative, or b is -34. And -34. And then a is 1. We're going to have that written down twice, which is 1 and 1. And c is 289. And so we can do all that multiplication. And we get negative times a negative is a positive. Plus or minus. -34 squared is 1,156. And then we're going to say minus -4 times 289 is 1,156. And that's all under the square root. And that's all divided by 2. So 1,156 minus 1,156, and we get x equals 34 plus or minus the square root of 0 all over 2. And when we have the square root of 0, that is just 0. And so we get x equals 30 divided by 2, which in this case we get 34. 34 divided by 2 is 17. So we get a double root at x equals 17. Another way that we say that is a multiplicity of 2. And when we say x equals 0, that means that we have, or x equals 17, 17, 0 is our solution there.